Oh, the laughs happening behind the scenes are amazing. Thanks all for being here. Let me just quickly introduce you to our audience and get this episode going. As any author will tell you, the journey of writing, publishing, and marketing your first business book is filled with uncertainties. So you should feel very proud if you transformed your ideas into a tangible book. Simply publishing, however, is just the beginning. Why did you write the book? How does the book fit into your larger business strategy? Surrounding yourself with fellow writers and authors can make all the difference in reaching your goals. I've created resources to help you find your author community and connect with over 50 hub partners ready to assist entrepreneurs in becoming successful authors. You can visit bizbookpublishinghub.com to discover these free resources, learn about our virtual networking events, and access archived podcast episodes. During the conversation with our authors, we'll explore the importance of connecting with experts who can help navigate the complexities of the publishing process and how to keep up the marketing well past the publication date. All three talented authors participated in one of my Kindle cross promotion campaigns. You can find out about the next campaign at bizkindlepromo.com. Before we dive into today's panel, here is a quick word from our sponsor. Let's meet the authors who will share their thoughts about the highs and lows of being a business author. Marcey Rader wrote, "Work well, play more, productive, clutter-free, healthy living, one step at a time," which offers practical strategies and insights for reducing clutter and enhancing productivity. It empowers readers to create a balanced life filled with joy and fulfillment. Sean Glaze wrote, "Staying Coachable, a story with 4 questions to help you thrive and change and enjoy relentless improvement," which offers a thought-provoking framework of questions designed to help individuals foster a growth mindset. And Stacey Larsen wrote, "Reframing the Leadership Dance, the secret to finding your rhythm as a people leader, exploring innovative leadership approaches." It emphasizes the importance of adaptability and self-discovery in fostering effective leadership practices and navigating complex organizational landscapes. Please join me in welcoming Marcey, Sean, and Stacey. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to kick things off with you, Marcey. I want to get a sense of who you wrote your book for. Who was the audience or ideal reader that you had in mind? And welcome.
Thank you. Work Well, Play More was written for people who want to change their behaviors, but to do it in a sustainable way. Most books that talk about fitness, nutrition, getting better sleep, getting to inbox zero, managing your tasks, decluttering your home, all of those tend to kind of go to the middle and be more theory, whereas mine gives steps and like actionable steps, like this is how to do it, instead of the book being about the why, which is what a lot of habit change books are about. Mine is more of the how, and it's divided into 12 different months, and each month has a productivity, clutter, and health behavior in levels of novice, pro, and master. So you can really, choose your own adventure, decide what you want to focus on for that month. And it fits almost every level of productivity, clutter, and health.
Wow, I love you describing the how you frame the book and the choose your own adventure style of the story. Makes you think, oh, this is a book I can return to over and over again for many years to come as I progress either in my sort of skill or aptitude level or also what I want to focus on. That's very, very cool. Sean, let me come over to you and hear a little bit about this particular book and your generally the books you've been writing. Who's the audience that you had in mind?
Oh goodness, I think that the audience is for the younger version of me, who is an ignorant knucklehead who stepped in a whole lot of potholes. I was a high school basketball coach. It's as a basketball coach that I came to work with leaders and teams on workplace culture and team leadership, which are things that I honestly neglected early on because I was so focused upon strategy. And strategy is essential, just like talent's essential. But rapid teamwork, my first book was about how do you build a culture where your talent can overachieve. And then I started working with what does it mean to be a winning teammate for those leaders to build better people within their organizations. And coming out of that is the most recent one, which is, of course, staying coachable. And as a coach, I had athletes that weren't always excited and appreciative and, kind of looking forward to applying some of the advice and coaching that I was delivering. Turns out that's not just a basketball phenomenon. That's something that happens in families and businesses and industries across the world, where there are people who are having to deal with change, who aren't always excited about it because complacency sets in. And we've reached our level of success because we were coachable to some point. And staying coachable is basically a story that shares 4 questions that you can use to yourself become more coachable and to help your team do so as well.
You know, it's interesting because I know a little bit about what Stacey's book's about, and I feel like there's some nice Venn diagrams. So, Stacey, share a little bit about how you're helping, hopefully, people who are not change resistant reframe their leadership dance. Who's the
Absolutely,
audience you had in
Robbie.
mind?
Yeah. I'm writing to and I work with leaders who are super smart. They've risen through the ranks, they're highly capable, and the company is growing and they're growing in their leadership. And they're trying to develop the leaders now below them, that middle level of the organization. And these leaders are told they're awesome. They know they're doing good work. They are also usually hearing, we've got to clone you. We've got to clone you. And they work amazing with self-starters, right? But there's a rub somewhere with people who are not right out of the gate resonating with their leadership style. So I help them reframe their leadership dance and dance differently with small tweaks to be more effective with any person that they need to lead, to manage, to work with, regardless of, whether they're a high performer, whether they are a self-starter.
Yeah, I can see all of you have some piece in this about change. So I never, you were chosen to be on the panel based on your time availability, but somehow there's always some common ground that we can find. Stacey, on this panel, you're the one with one book, and so I'm going to be asking all of them to like dig back to when it was the first time they were writing a book, and what was important to them back then, and that's a more recent phenomenon for you. So I'm going to start with you, Stacey. When you were getting ready to write this book, long before you and I ever talked about it, what were the metrics of success that you initially thought, okay, if the book does this, I'll know it was a success?
Well, I think originally, Robbie, it was if I get it done. Uh, it was, how do I get this book out of me? I delayed it for a really long time. I had the ideas for it. I knew it was there. I knew it was in me. I knew there were a lot of client stories to tell about what people were dealing with and that it could be done in a different way. But I don't know that at the beginning I had very many metrics. I'm kind of allergic to metrics in a more SMART goal kind of sense. They don't feel authentic to me. So as I really sat down to write, it was more about, how do I look at each story that I write? And how do I make sure that that story resonates with the reader? How do I make sure my voice is coming across and sounding like I sound with my clients every day? So a lot of the metrics that I was using were when people would advance read and I would ask them, does this sound like me? Do you resonate with these stories? That was what was most important for me at the beginning.
Well, I think it's important that we always start with a good book that has a specific audience in mind and will help those people. So I think it's important that you had those metrics to start with to make sure it was resonating, that your voice was coming across. Real quick, what changed? Like you had your launch recently. What were the metrics you started to pay attention to?
What changed is I met you, Robbie. And what I learned from you was I could leverage my network and be authentic and have a simple metric of reviews for the book on Amazon. And then I could leverage my readers to be able to share with other people what resonated specifically with them, what mattered most to them. And that became my metric of success.
Awesome. So, Sean, I'm going to come over to you. You've got multiple books out. You got more books coming. This is the thing. Like, once you get past this angst about writing that first book, you give yourself hopefully a little bit of a break, and then more comes out. How did you initially think about what was important, and what's changed as you approach each new book? Do you have a new sense of, oh, I want to make sure this happens?
Mm-hmm. No, I think that what Stacey opened with, I think, is so true for the very first book. That you write it because you have a story or content that you want to share, but you just want to prove that you can actually jump through those hoops and get this big kind of marathon of a project completed to the level of standard professionalism that you feel would be appropriate for what you think would be successful. And then you realize after that first publication that there is so much more to the success of a book than just the writing and publishing of it. And so, to your point, the first book was, let's get it done and get it out there and see if that can be a takeaway from the events and the conferences that I speak and facilitate at. And then with the subsequent books, again, just like with basketball, you do well what you do often. You got to be willing to be bad long enough to get better. And as an author, I think that's true as well. And so with each subsequent book, I've been a little bit more focused upon who is that audience, who's going to benefit, how can I maybe market it a little bit better, how can I actually launch a little bit more successfully and gain a few reviews so that actually gets a little more traction. And to Stacey's point, again, having met and spoken with you, Robbie, I think you do a fantastic job of defining some of those key metrics that make a book launch far more effective. And that's one of the reasons I was very grateful to have the conversations we have recently and to be here today.
That's brilliant. Marcey is the only person I think we haven't had a long-term conversation about her next book. So now Marcey's like, wait, what am I missing? Marcey, let's bring you into the conversation. You've got books behind you. You've got at least one book in front of you I know is coming out soon. Same journey. It's probably in the beginning, which is about getting the book published, but how does that evolve for you over time? What are the metrics that you now think are key for your book to be a success?
I want to start by saying that with my first book, my husband is a professional drummer and musician. And so this is my analogy. My first book was like recording in my parents' basement. My second book was like going to a local studio and actually paying somebody. My third book was like going to Nashville, and my fourth book, I'm looking for a Grammy. So every book, it's like when people buy starter homes, like my first book, I had no metrics. I don't even sell it anymore because I don't want anyone to buy it. If they have it, I give them a copy of my third book, and so I think that metrics evolve over time when you kind of get comfortable as an author. And for me, with Work Well, Play More, the metrics started out as books sold, but we only have so much control over that. And then it started to be more about the reviews, and then it became, book clubs. And every time I'd hear somebody say that I started a book club because of your book, or, there's 7 people in our neighborhood that are going through your book and we get together once a month and hold each other accountable. It was the stories like that was so exciting to me. And I've had companies hire me to do like an Ask the Author every month as they go through the months of the book. And so it's more about it. It sounds kind of cliche or cheesy, but it really is more about impact when it comes to that. And with my fourth book, which is, it's called Reclaim Your Workday, Sustainable Productivity Strategies for the New World of Work. It's also productivity strategies, but it's for individual contributor, managers, and C-suite business owners. So there are levels again for that book. And my metrics for that book are going to be more about how many companies or teams invest in the book rather than individual book sales.
I'm so glad that you're naming this piece about book sales. And it's also interesting that none of you started the conversation saying, well, for my first book, I just assumed I was going to sell 10,000 copies. I have met authors who came into the process with that as their goal, which is a very disappointing goal to have for nearly every author who doesn't already have an enormous following.
Right.
So I just wanted to share some numbers because I think people listening have an overestimate about the book sales. So a huge majority of books sell less than 100 copies the first year. The average about 200 and 5,000 in a year is like true success in the world of publishing, particularly self-publishing, hybrid publishing, where you don't have people coming in already with like 200,000 people on an email list and like, Brene Brown levels of notoriety. So with that in mind, I think you can kind of reset your goals. When we were on a call for another panel, someone was like, "Oh, I've sold 140 books and my book's been out for like 9 months. I feel a lot better now than I did in the beginning of this. Like, oh, so I'm kind of doing okay, So I think we have to know that, but it's not about I love what you just said, Marcey. It's less about those individual sales, maybe just in the very beginning when you're focusing on getting those reviews, but beyond that, it is about the impact. It is about people hiring you, companies bringing you in, book clubs being set up, asking you to come speak, bulk orders of books when you go speak. There's just so much more potential. But I'm curious, does anyone notice like a seismic shift about how others relate to them now that they're an author? Like Stacey, you're one of the newer authors here. Did it shift something between you, your clients, your prospects that you have a book versus, when you didn't have a book?
I've noticed a couple of things, and they're small. I mean, one is that I think when I'm talking to someone about how I could work with them, it somehow closes the deal faster. They can go look at the book, they could read the book, they can understand my style, how I speak. We get to know each other faster. I get to a yes faster. I think the other thing that I notice is that it creates more sustainability in the people that I work with. As I go through a retreat with a team that is reading my book, they will reference the book again and again, go back to different pieces that I talked about, and be able to have it sink in more and relate to other people more about particular points.
It's nice. It's a really strong leave behind. Like they get to hold on to it, refer to it, talk about it. I think the best compliment I ever got for the work that I did speaking and writing my first book was when I went back to an audience that overlapped with a conference I had been to, spoke at 3 years earlier, and I met someone who was not actually at that company 3 years earlier. And she was able to walk up to me and say something that referenced my first book because people were still talking about it when she joined the team a year later. And so that kind of long tail of your content being sunk into the culture of an organization where people are repeating it and crediting you, like that she knew to come up to me to say something about it was really kind of fun. And I think the fact that I had the books that stayed behind made that a lot easier over time. So Stacey, one other thing before I come off of you, when I look, all three of you, by the way, have done a great job with your reviews. Sometimes the panels have a bit of a lopsided response to this. So kudos to all of you. Stacey, though, if there was a prize, like incredibly good job here. You and I have talked about this before. One of the things I really find amazing for what you've done is the ratio of ratings to written reviews is nearly 100%. You have 63 star ratings, which you don't even need to pay to buy. You don't have to buy a book to leave a star rating. You don't have to write anything. People could just like write, put 4 stars, 5 stars. But you have 62 written reviews. So 63 ratings, 62 written reviews. That's nearly 100%. That tells me you really focused on the review piece. So before I come to how you did that, I want to just acknowledge that you all did really great. So Marcey's got 55 ratings and 44 reviews, and let's see, Sean has 44 ratings and 34 reviews. Any more than 20 reviews, 20 written reviews, tells me that you all had a process. You had a plan around this, whether you had it immediately or you came up with it later. That's the part I'm kind of curious about. But I'm also curious kind of who wrote these reviews. Were they prospects and referral partners, friends, family, fellow authors? How did you get people to actually follow through? Because it is Oh, it's so painful. It's not easy to do. I mean, I have 650 plus reviews across my 3 books. So when I say that I know how to do this, I get it. Like, I'm really aiming for like hundreds of reviews for each book, but it's like hand holding. It's a lot of support. So I'm gonna actually kick things over here to Marcey. Because Marcey, I don't know a lot about your process and how you approach this. And have you sort of seen tweaks to your process as you've had each book come out? You know, probably wasn't even on your mind that much initially because it's never really a thing people talk about, but clearly it is now. So how did that shift for you? And what was the best method, I guess, for getting those written reviews?
Sure. The first 2 books, I don't even know if I asked for a review. Because I mean, those were written like 9 and 8 years ago or 7 years ago. With Work Well, Play More, there is a couple of places in the book that I asked for the review, but it was having a launch strategy, which I didn't even know what a launch was a decade ago. Like I didn't have any kind of process. With this new book that's coming out in January, the process is much more dialed in with my launch team, asking them for their reviews and, I'm going to have reminders scheduled, checking to see if they've done their review. I'm going to be giving, I have a raffle for people, for the people that do the reviews that are on the launch team, if they do the review by a certain date. And I also decided to put in the book in 3 different places because it doesn't matter how great the book is. A lot of people don't finish a book. And so I have it about towards the beginning, about a quarter of the way, and then halfway through the book, another like SOS, you've made it this far. Can you leave a review? And then I have it again at the end. And so that I'm going to test out, but it's really more about making that review piece one of the biggest parts of the process for my launch team.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing, Robbie, I'm sorry, because I did this for my TEDx talk, and I'm going to use this again as well. When people watched, or like when they came to my live TEDx talk or they watched it, when they would send me an email or a text and say like, oh my gosh, I would copy and paste it. And then I saved it for when the video came out. And I said, this is what you said that day. Can you copy and paste it as a comment? And so anybody that is saying anything to me that's not in an Amazon review, I will copy and paste, and put it and, link to my review page and say, can you just paste this here?
That last piece you just said is something that we all can do ongoing over and over again. It's just remembering to follow up on that with people. Like, here's the text you just sent me. I do that for LinkedIn reviews, LinkedIn recommendations. Like, I just spoke somewhere, client says something nice in an email. I make sure we're connected on LinkedIn. I send the piece and then sort of make a note a week later to check, did it come in? And then like nudge them a little bit. It is about making this process as easy as possible. Sean, what would you like to add about your sort of ideas around launching? And also, you and I had a whole conversation about my plan to get 50 or more Amazon reviews and build up the launch team and all of that. So what are you thinking as you're approaching this again for your next book?
Well, again, I think that it's an evolution of awareness of what's going to give the book more legs and have it be a little bit more impactful to the audience that you're intending. And so you go from just getting a book out there to being a little bit more intentional about the last couple of books, having, again, the launch and building in with the speakers that I know because of my speaking and with previous clients to reach out kind of for the launch team, for them to be able to get the advanced copy and do some of the reviews that can be included on Amazon and even in the book. And then the next, I think, iteration of that is where you come in and recognizing that, that strategy can continually be improved when you're more aware of the opportunity to use a book as a lead gen. And again, books, you asked Stacey initially, what is the difference in having a book versus not having a book as a speaker or facilitator working with organizations or associations? And I think specifically, it does add a little bit of credibility to your website. It's how I've been found for events. But then again, it is such a powerful leave behind kind of takeaway that, it's an entertaining and value added business card, basically, that people can go home and kind of get a lot of the content from the event in the form of a story, because I normally write parables, but it's ultimately something that I think ends up being a nice way to be found and to make sure that you are remembered after the event, maybe brought into the next organization somebody's a part of, because they want that message to be shared as well.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that. And I love that you focus on stories, because that is the most memorable way for us to communicate and share ideas. Stacey, you took to this really quickly. And I think the main thing I remember us having conversations about was the who of what your launch team would be built on. I've had conversations with authors who have 34 reviews, but no pipeline, no business plan, no way of leveraging that book. And when, they come to me for a relaunch, and I'm like, but you have 34 reviews, like, why not work with those people? And they're like, oh, my friends and family really came through for me. And I'm like, oh, facepalm, because friends and family don't have budget. So you spend a lot of time digging through your network, not just your email list, but your network, to figure out who to invite. So I'd love to hear kind of how that process worked for you, what you discovered along the way, and then we could talk about the outcome again.
Absolutely. I think for me, I was in that same place that you're describing. What kind do I really have that big of a network? But when I went through the exercise that you had me do, actually literally going through my LinkedIn contacts, going through my email, seeing who my past clients were, people who know me, people who already have an idea of what I'm about, I ended up with somewhere in the 400s of people that I could invite to be on my launch team. And not everybody joined the launch team, but that was okay too. And people, even if they didn't join the launch team, I got a lot of messages that said, launch teams aren't my thing, but I do want to support your book. And so I grabbed onto those and made a separate list of those so that I could come back when the launch party was coming up and invite them to the launch party, invite them to be part of the celebration, invite them to just do a review after the fact and not feel like they had to be in a big, hairy process.
Mm-hmm.
All along the way, what I loved that you told me was make it simple and be persistent. Make it simple and be persistent. And I did. I wrote messages from the heart to people that basically honored whatever they thought of the book. I remember having a conversation with one person in particular after one of the live events that we did leading up to the launch. And I like live. I'm comfortable on video. And afterwards, this person admitted to me, I don't like the metaphor. I don't like the dance thing. I don't know if I can write a review. And I said, well, tell me more. And they actually loved everything the book was saying, but they were hung up on the dance metaphor. I said, I wonder how many other people in the world don't love a dance metaphor. I would love for you to do a review, and I would love for you to start off by saying, hey, I didn't like the dance metaphor, but, and then fill in the blank. And then I shared with the rest of the network and said, hey, just had this conversation with someone. Maybe this applies to you too. And suddenly I got more reviews that came in because they had permission to be their authentic selves in their review.
I love this. Reviews help prospective buyers make a decision about whether or not the thing you're writing is something that would be serving them. And if in this case, the metaphor was kind of getting in the way, it helps to see other people who are like, oh, you're like me, but you still found that valuable. So it could be a 3-star rating that still tells somebody this book is for me. I make this joke on this show now all the time, so anyone who's been listening has heard this, but my wife listens to a lot of audiobooks, like 280 a year, with a handful of Kindle thrown in. But I don't think it's probably predominantly, or at least half of those books are romance books. And she and I were joking about how, like, she can come across a book that has a 1-star rating and the person's like, oh, there's so much smut. She's like, well, what's the book? Right? Like one person's yuck is someone else's yum, right? I had someone write a review for my second book because I collect them in advance. So he writes this book, this review, and he clearly didn't like it. And I reached out to him and I said, and he's like, I loved your first book. My first book was about networking at conferences, which is a very universal book. The second book was written for entrepreneurial women in their 50s and beyond, looking to grow their impact and income through a new revenue stream. And he was none of those things. Okay. He's not an entrepreneur. He's not a woman. He's not in his 50s. He's not trying to build a business. So I said, could you just kind of acknowledge the frame of where you're coming from? So he did. And that ends up being a really helpful review. He's like, I loved Robbie's first book. This one wasn't really my cup of tea. I'm not building a business. There was a few takeaways around networking I found helpful. I think this is going to be better for someone who's actually building a business. Wow, that is a really helpful review. I don't care how many stars you give me. That's a review. And by the way, his review stands out because it isn't a 5-star review. It's probably one of the few reviews out of 220 that people actually read because it's not 5 stars. So there was maybe a strategy there about getting a really good 4-star review. So I think that we're all, you all, again, great game on here. I think I aim for 50 plus with my clients because it requires a real process behind it. And it distinguishes you from other people who haven't made that effort. Most people don't even get to 20. I see a lot that have over 100 ratings and less than 10 written reviews. And that to me, I don't know. I don't even know how to respond to that. Like, I don't know what that is. And they're walking around as if they have hundreds of reviews when they don't. They have ratings. So I'm curious if anyone has a story of what was hard other than getting reviews. Marcey, I'm going to come to you for this question. Reviews are its own bear, but was the writing coming easy to you? Where did you need a team? Where did you realize you needed the most support? Did you love the marketing? Did you not love the marketing? Like, where do you see what other people may not even think about? Like, oh, yes, you should definitely work with people for this or this, or know whether this is your strength or not.
Yeah, great question. To me, it was in the developmental editing. So my first 2 books, like I used a friend of mine that said she was good at editing to edit, and then as soon as the book was released, I had another friend say, come back and say, there are so many errors in here. It's distracting. I can't read it anymore. And so with my third book, I hired a developmental editor. Her name is Emily Crookston at the Pocket PhD. And she's the one that definitely took me to the next level. And I hired her again for this one, for the new book. And the developmental editing kind of makes sure that things have a flow that makes sense, because we know what we're trying to say all the time. We know what the steps are. And it's so hard to come outside yourself and read it as somebody who doesn't know these things. And so what a developmental editor does is they look at all of your stuff and they say, like, okay, we need more content here. We need less here. This is redundant, or we need to address this again. Here's the right flow. And it makes a world of difference. And I would say, out of all the money that I invest in my book, the developmental editor is number one for me.
I'm so glad you described what they do, because there are 3 kinds of editors, and most of us don't know that. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
So developmental editors, just like you described, and you need to talk to them pretty early in the process. Like, this is not something you'd want to get into when you're trying to get to the publishing date. This is something when you've got an outline you're working on, as you start putting together your first draft. And if the sooner you have that conversation, the easier the flow will come together, and you'll be doing a lot less work later. And for my second book, I was really fortunate to get an editor who kind of did a blur of developmental editing. She also did the copy editing as we kind of went. She was an ideal reader, and I really appreciated that, because she was responding as somebody who also wanted to learn this content. So she was invested in it making sense for herself. and was thinking about my wider audience. So that's the other thing I've realized is like finding somebody who's not just good at this editing piece, but the more that they're kind of into your content, they'll also react as a future reader would, and that will help you pull the right stories in, write illustrations, expand on the points. When I first started writing my second book, the process that I wanted to write about, I didn't know this at the time, but I had steps 1, 4, 7, and 10. I did not know that. I had been coaching on this process for a few years. But when you're coaching, you can give people 1, 4, 7, and 10, and then you meet every week and you have conversations to fill in the gaps. Like just because you don't have it spelled out doesn't mean you weren't helping them. But now I wanted to write it down. And as I was working with her, it's like, oh, 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C. Like, oh, and then I workshopped it. I had people actually using it to see how it worked for them. So I think having your audience involved as well. And then copy editing is like the commas and the passive verb and all of that stuff. And then you have proofreaders who just like do that final read through. For my third book, I made a little bit of a mistake because I was rushing. The timeline was intense. I didn't get to run every chapter through Grammarly before handing it off to my editor. So she ended up spending a way extra time just fixing commas. I mean, it's a really bad use of a human to like have her fix my commas. Whereas the second book, I ran everything through the Grammarly first, and then she did a lot more developmental editing because we had the time for it. So I thank you for bringing that up because I think people listening are like, the what? I have to pay for that? Yeah, that's a worthwhile investment. Stacey, what would you like to add?
I'll add that I think you need to really know that you can work well with the editor. I think it's important to start early, figuring out who's right to work with and the whole process too. I found out so much too late in the process, and it was like crunch time. And everyone that I talk to who's thinking about writing a book, that natural instinct is, well, I'll get the book started and then I'll find the people. I actually would flip it. For my next book, I would flip it and I would learn all the things about self-publishing and other publishing and options and who are great contacts for editors and getting those relationships in place even before I ever put pen to paper, more than ideas, because then you have the team behind you to get going. I didn't even have my business offers connected to the book, which I'm still working on. Thank heavens for you, Robbie.
That last piece, I just have to sort of emphasize this. Most authors don't.
No.
I ask a question. So I do complimentary 30-minute book launch brainstorming sessions with anybody who will fill out the form asking for them, basically. And I ask a couple of questions at the very beginning. Tell me a little about your book. They all know how to answer that question. And then I say, so tell me how the book fits in with your larger business strategy. Like, what offers will it be leading people to? 2/3 of the people have like a response, and it's not meant to be a gotcha question, right? It's not meant. It's like for me to better understand what your goals are, but they don't understand their goals. So I think that is a given for a lot of people, not just for their first book, by the way. I see this is a mistake that keeps happening. Sometimes people don't learn and they keep writing books that are for everyone and lead nowhere. So there's that. And then, getting started as soon as possible. One resource that everyone here can use who's listening is bizbookpublishinghub.com. We have more than 50 hub partners who are experts in everything from writing, editing, publishing, and marketing. You'll find the editor I was talking about, Linda Popke, there. And what's cool is you'll get to see the kind of work she does, that you like read her description to see whether you're drawn to her or not. Like, just because I enjoyed working with her does not mean she's going to be for everybody. Just like we are not all for everybody. But we asked everybody to share kind of what differentiates them for others who do their work, what's their standout, and what are the kinds of authors they really enjoy working with and can really help. So going there and checking out those hub profiles, I think, is a good start. This is something I wish I'd had getting started. Sean, I'm going to come to you with a different kind of question here, because you are writing a book with a very particular audience in mind. And so I'm curious, what was your most effective marketing strategy that led to book sales? So I know we're not all about just making money from the book, but there are some things that spike sales for a day or lead to a bulk order of sales. So what has happened as you've had these books that you could share with us?
Yeah, well, that's something I'm still seeking to learn. And again, glad to be able to listen to Stacey and Marcey, and obviously to have connected with you, Robbie, because that's something that I'm constantly, when I have these conversations and listen to the conversations, I'm constantly kind of making notes to myself. Hey, I need to make sure I'm paying more attention to that, because I was certainly one who, I started building a house before I reached out to an architect to kind of help me. And you have to kind of unbuild some stuff to go back and do it right. And then you realize how valuable on the front end some of that planning is. And you're talking to the HVAC guy and making sure you got the plumbing ready, and that idea of the outline of the story and knowing the content. And I think those are all valuable. What I've seen in terms of my experience and kind of those spikes that I've enjoyed, obviously the launch is the major spike that I had. And then ultimately it's when I'm contacted for a speaking event, or I'm contacted to work with an organization specifically on change or team building, et cetera, making that book part of the event. And that's where most of my book sales have honestly come from. And the thing that again has been really positive for me is a lot of my work is now either repeat or referral. So when those people go to a different organization, hey, we had a great experience with you here, we were better because, now we want to bring you in. And ultimately it's that book that's part of their move box that goes from one office to the next that ends up being the catalyst.
I really love this idea that the book, people don't like throwing away books. I mean, it's really, really hard to recycle a book. We really don't want to do that, like, ever. So if you're packing up your office, you're not gonna like put it to the side and like go and bring it to a library to donate, right? Like, it's a collection. You just keep it with you, and then it goes back on the shelf in the new office, and you're like, oh wait, yeah, that guy. I should hire John again. Let's be like. I love that this leave behind really doesn't go away. Unlike business cards, flyers, postcards, there's a lot. The only other thing I think I've ever seen that's worked as well has been magnets that people put on their filing cabinets. I have done that with some nonprofits I've worked with, where we've given people magnets that they could bring home and like put on their home refrigerator. And again, they'll never throw them away. Or I have gone to people's offices and found those magnets sitting on the filing cabinet. So very few things stick around as much as those book and I guess literally a magnet. And it is those bulk book sales that I think drive things, but the reviews matter. Like, I want to just tie this together as we move forward, as we wrap this up, because when there are lots of books, I think it's like 1 million books a year or something. I keep hearing different numbers, but there's a zillion books released every year. And how do you stand out when there's so many leadership books, there's so many this books, or whatever it is? Well, one way to do that is to have 50 plus reviews. And if those reviews are coming from prospects and referral partners, that's your pipeline. That's how you're going to get those leads for that next offer, the speaking, coaching, consulting. I'm agnostic when it comes to what that next thing is, but it's about having a plan for that next thing. And then, yeah, the spin-off business that keeps coming from that. And then future like prospects, when they're thinking about hiring you because, someone recommends you, they glance over at your website, they glance at your Amazon, and the reviews help as part of the overall validation that this is not just some like random AI crap book. But so we're about to wrap up here. In a moment, we're going to get to a question where I would like to know your best advice for someone who's writing a book to help them grow their business. Marcey, I'm going to kick things off with you. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. Marcey, I can't imagine you have only one piece of advice. So 1 or 2 things that you want to share with someone who's an aspiring author, specifically writing a book to help them grow a business.
1, hire somebody to help you, join a program, do some, like, you might think that you know how to do it. Trust me, you don't. And even when you've done it for your 4th time, like I am now, still hire people to help you. And the second thing that worked for me really well for all 4 books is I go somewhere and, completely out of the computer. I'm there for, 4 days, a week, however long, and I write my books that way. And the last book that I wrote, I spent two different times at a cottage, just an hour from my house, for 3 or 4 days. And I wrote most of the book in those two sessions. And so it's, I highly recommend getting an Airbnb, going to a hotel or something, and getting away from your normal environment to write.
I've heard that last piece from a few people, different ways of doing that. I even just like getting out of my normal situation. If you don't have the funds to go away, you can find a gorgeous hotel lobby with
Mm-hmm.
free coffee and
Yep.
often snacks. And just spend the day by a fire in a beautiful hotel lobby. I did a lot of writing in a space like that for one of my books because I was away in a trip, and I didn't want to stay in my hotel room. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually was like, I could have done this when I was at home. Like, why do I have to be away to do this? So that's my 2 cents to add to that. Sean, I'm going to come over to you. What's the advice you have to share?
Oh, I love the idea of finding a place that's going to be different, and you get rid of a lot of those common distractions that are tapping us on the shoulder each day. Uh, I think background as a coach probably is the foundation for the one piece of advice I would share. I think writing obviously is a very solitary type of activity. You're in your head and you're alone with the laptop that you're working on, and unfortunately, no matter how talented you are, if you don't have a good team around you, you're not going to have the success that you want. So I think very certainly having those clear metrics of what is your purpose of writing the book, what is success going to mean to you as an author, and then building a team so that you can actually accomplish that instead of having to do everything less professionally yourself because you're just learning it. And if you can invest in quality help and build a great team around you of people who have been there and done that, can help you down the path effectively, that's going to make you so much more proud of the work that you create.
I'm just thinking about what my life would be like if I had had these messages like in the years before that first book. I mean, I like Stacey had a book in me. I was trying to write book proposals. I was trying all these things for years. I had a talk that I was doing and I was like, I know I can make this to a book. And yeah, we have to find a way to get out of our own way and get the team around us, get the support, get a program, get a coach, whatever it might be, just fill in the gaps so that we're not by ourselves creating kind of shoddy, amateur looking work. Because this book is something we hope to have proud. I mean, the fact, Marcy, that you have a book that you don't want to talk about isn't what I want everyone to have for their first book. It's a reality. I think it happens to way too many people. But maybe if they heard these kinds of messages that you and Sean are sharing, it could help people invest earlier, to get that, to have a book that 8 years later they're still talking about. I mean, that is really cool when that is able to happen. All right, Stacey, pulling us together here in the wrap up. What's the advice you'd have for the folks who are going to follow in your footsteps writing a book?
Absolutely. For the front end of it, when you're writing, follow your instincts. Don't let anyone tell you that this is the way it has to be done. Whether that means how you're writing it, how fast you're writing it, the way you're writing it. You want your team with you, but you're not going to write it like anybody else. So figure out what motivates you to put your own plan together. Figure out how you need to write and make sure you have the team that fits you. And the second thing I'll say is when the book is done, you're not done. So think about, plan for a book launch process and get a team like Robbie's to help you with the book launch process, because that's what's going to make it tie together and make you be able to have the impact that you want to have, not just write the book.
You know, Stacey, since you and I have worked together, I now do have a team because I now have VAs that will manage all the emails. Could you imagine if that had not been on your plate? How much easier
Right?
that would have been.
Right?
Great advice. And again, I hope those listening are taking lots of notes. Stacey, how can people find you and follow your work?
AuthenticEdge.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Stacey Larsen with an ENEDD.
Fantastic. By the way, all the links that are mentioned are going to be in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com. Marcey, where can people find you and follow your work?
Hello, raderco.com or marceyrader.com. And my name's also spelled with an E, MarceyRader. And I am LinkedIn only, and I am on, I'm as Marcey Rader.
Fantastic. And Sean?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Find me online at Great Results Team Building or effectiveleaders.live. Obviously, LinkedIn as well, Sean Glaze, and would be more than happy to work with you as a leader or team to help you guys be a little bit better in terms of the culture to create and the impact of the books that I know all three of us have created for leaders and teams to be that much better.
Fantastic. We're going to put all the links in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com, which is also where you're going to find an invitation to attend a free virtual networking event for writers and authors that I host throughout the year. All these show notes and more than 50 hub partners, these experts who help entrepreneurs become successful authors. I am really looking forward to all the books that people are going to be writing because of these remarks that they're hearing today, and perhaps these people will now be future authors on a future author panel, which is a really cool idea for us to be able to see happen. Thanks for joining us today, everyone.